Life's too short to exercise. I'm just gonna be honest. There are so many better things to do than exercise.
Men can cry. So it's okay to be weak.
It is okay to be fat.
Men are not meant to be dominant. Men are meant to be submissive. They're meant to be worker ants. They're supposed to listen to women because men do not have the ability to think for themselves.
I'm sure if everyone tried to define masculinity, everyone would have a different example and anecdotal evidence to what they think it is. I mean, damn, in today's times, we can't even define what a woman is anymore, let alone the fact that masculinity is seen as something negative instead of positive. It is seen as something to bring oneself down instead of to bring them up. Since the beginning of time, the only thing that has ever been respected is strength, no matter if it's emotional or physical. Nature itself is in a constant battle between power dynamics, the yin and yang of things. To think that you are better off without power and strength means you go against nature itself. Dysfunction and decay is the only thing that's in your future. Masculinity is eternal.
Friend, you better, if you're my friend, you just can't be. Well, I had a heart attack. Get the f up. What's wrong with you?
As the internet becomes bigger and more of an influential place that people get their direct information from, that is why we are seeing certain tropes and misconceptions about masculinity itself.
Here is why it's easy for me to take your...
You have to understand, most people are trying to flex and display the best sides of themselves, or at least what they think is the best sides. So when it comes to masculinity, the obvious things are fitness and braggadocious lifestyles with plenty of women and money. How else are you going to flex the fact that you're the top G besides money and women? When it comes to advertising your masculinity, smarts and intellect isn't necessarily at the top of the list. More so superficial and materialistic beings that don't mean a damn thing in life, but to the layman, it does. Why flex your critical thinking and self-awareness skills when you can flex some money and ass and get more people's attention? Masculinity is defined as the quality or nature of a male sex. It refers to the roles, behaviors, and attributes that are considered appropriate for boys and men in a given society. Masculinity is constructed and defined socially, historically, and politically rather than being biologically driven. Now, I have a direct issue with this definition of masculinity because I do believe masculinity itself is biologically driven. Now, obviously, if you're not a man, you can definitely have masculine traits. However, to be masculine means to be a man. Our biology directly affects whether we are to be masculine or feminine. To be born into a male body means that you are more likely, on average, to be capable of handling physical tasks more than the average woman. That in itself gives men responsibility to take care of masculine problems, that of which women cannot always handle. Obviously, there's some women out there who can take care of certain situations that require physical strength, but definitely not all. And obviously there are some men that are born that are not that strong, or just by default have weaker bone density and muscle fibers that don't grant them the access to have average male strength. There's a lot of nuance to this conversation because of the world that we live in today, so there's a lot of things that goes without saying, but I have to say, due to the fact of a lot of you getting triggered over the fact that men are just stronger than women, period. Thus, if you are born a male, you have responsibility to be strong. Now, you don't have to, but it is seen as a responsibility and as a duty as being born a man. And that goes from everything from emotional to physical, psychological, spiritual. It doesn't matter. Men are seen as the leaders, and that's just the way that it is, whether you like it or not. So to defame the importance of a man, to defame the importance of masculinity itself, means to go against nature, and thus our survival is questionable. Without strength, we only have weakness.
You can't be weak. And in this country, being weak is thought of as a virtue. Jordan Peterson has a really interesting way of looking at this, and he said it to me once, and it made a lot of sense. He said, people think that you should be weak and you should be docile, and then you should be a pacifist. He goes, no, you should be a monster. He said you should be ruthlessly ambitious and then learn how to control it. And it's that old expression, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Wow. Toxic masculinity.
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 With great power comes great responsibility. It is unfortunate to know in this society that those who retain power have the control to corrupt. This just highlights the fact that the world that we live in is unfair, and it will never be fair no matter how much equality and equity that we pump into it. Nature respects power, but power doesn't always respect nature. Toxic masculinity is a term that was branded to provoke masculinity itself. However, it's a paradox. How can that of which be negative when it stands for strength, courage, and independence? Something that is all good and all powerful can only turn bad or be bad if you place a variable into it. The only way masculinity itself can be toxic is if something else entirely that is opposite to masculinity is judging it. If you are a weak, timid, dependent man that enjoys your way of living, the direct opposite of that is obviously going to be seen negative by you because it goes against everything that you know. But does that mean what is polar opposite to you negative? And so now you see the conversation that we're having is completely different than what the general public believes toxic masculinity is. And obviously we are not absolute in our traits. Some men skew more feminine, some women skew more masculine. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day, depending on what it is that you believe and what it is that you go fight for. But this general belief that masculinity itself is toxic, it's a negative thing, it's a negative trait that needs to be put down, is insane. Masculinity is strength, power, courage, bravery, independence. There is no way to negatively commodify those attributes.
Tell us, if you would, if you know the answer, what is toxic masculinity? How do you catch it? What's the cure?
Well, according to the professor's article, toxic masculinity is the man's fear that he's losing his power.
It seems like nowadays everybody wants to be strong, but nobody wants to compete against each other. Instead, they want everybody to be weak and basic because of their own limitations. Instead of tempering themselves and making themselves better, they want everybody to be weak to make themselves feel good. Hard work is hard, there's no doubt about that, but that's the only way to prove to yourself and others that you are worthy of anything. On the basis of existence, we don't deserve anything. It's what we set out to achieve what makes us valuable. And like I said before, it's unfair, but this is the world that we live in. It's kill or be killed. Natural selection at its finest. And for some people, that's just too much. Toxic masculinity has no clear definition, but is generalized as a set of certain male behaviors associated with harm to society and men themselves. Stereotypical aspects of traditional masculinity, such as social dominance, misogyny, and homophobia, can be considered toxic due in part to their promotion of violence, including assault and socialization of boys often normalizes violence, such as in the saying, boys will be boys, about bullying and aggression. Now, I don't know about y'all, but from my own personal experience from being born a man and being raised with brothers, this is farthest from the truth. And any man who has been raised with these realities was misguided and a fool. Men are not born with misogynistic views, homophobia, or even bullying, violent aggression. Those are all learned traits. Could there be genetic variation with some traits being more likely than others? Sure. However, at the end of the day, it comes down to parenting and how they were raised. What is the environment that they grew up in to see why this or that way is appropriate or not? To write it off as if masculinity has anything to do with these behaviors is false. Self-reliance and emotional repression are also correlated with toxic masculinity, and to that I would say men deal with their emotions differently from women. Men express themselves based on actions. Women is based on talking and feelings. If men get pissed off, they're willing to go do something about it. For women, it's not the same. Now, obviously, if you have some type of emotional repression and you're dealing with depression or increased stress, substance abuse, you definitely need some help. But at the end of the day, talking isn't always the easiest way for men to go about dealing with their feelings or emotions, for that matter, or just dealing with a situation. Sometimes less talk, more work, more action gets the job done. And that always isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes crying about a situation or moping around about the situation will never solve it. You have to do something about it. And if that's not you, if you don't respond that type of way to situations in your life, then so be it. That's not a problem. But calling it toxic masculinity as if we're doing something wrong or it is negative is wrong. Men are not just gonna sit back and watch their lives go to shit. Some men are willing to do something about it, and I would say most men are, except for this new modern time when men let other people walk all over them and feel completely helpless and feel like a victim in their own life that they live when they have full power over it. And not only that, but also becoming this get along to go along type of person to not offend anyone or get anybody mad. Trust me, I know there's some real assholes out there that are real harsh and rugged, but at the end of the day, they don't represent all of men, nor should they.
So I just left the restaurant after waiting 30 minutes for a date to show up, and apparently I got stood up. I don't know what to say. Like, I'm trying to do everything right to be a gentleman. I brought flowers. I've been consistent talking with this girl for 2 weeks, trying to get to know what she likes, what she doesn't like. I made plans. I picked the restaurant, the day, and the time. You know, I've done everything to be just the kind of guy that would value somebody's time. Like, I'm just looking for my person. I'm just looking for the one that, I guess, is out there for me. I mean, I want to be somebody's husband someday, father. I'm trying to do everything that's right, and I just get stood up. Like, my feelings didn't even matter. Sitting there eating a meal by myself and realizing that nobody even cares about people anymore. Like, alien dating shouldn't even be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to find somebody. It shouldn't be this difficult to fall in love, to be kind to one another. Like, what, ladies, tell me, what did I do wrong?
Whether it be a meme or not, one of the biggest realizations that I made in this life is the fact that hard times make strong people, and strong people create easy times. Easy times create weak people. And I know this is memed a lot on the internet, especially due to Joe Rogan. However, this is a reality. You have to understand, when you have a silver spoon in your mouth, you're not forced. There is no temptation to go get it, to go work hard, to be dedicated towards any specific goal. Now, obviously you can be, but there is no drive or benefit to do so due to the fact that you already have certain conveniences and luxuries at your hand. I mean, just think about it. After C-19, the world jumped into content creation, jumped into working from home, ordering food from home, ordering groceries from home, and all of a sudden, now that it's time to get back to work, we have this huge epidemic of quiet quitting, or phrases like soft girl era or even lazy girl era. There is a mass exodus going on from working and people thinking they deserve more than what they put in. I mean, a perfect example of this is Uber drivers or even DoorDash drivers. Of course, they should be paid for their job. However, a livable wage is irresponsible and ridiculous to say the least. Not all jobs are going to pay you a livable wage, nor should they. Some jobs are just for gigs, some jobs are just for side hustles. Not every single job that you get into is going to respond with a livable wage where you can support an entire family off of. Not only that, like I said before, people only respect you when you bring value to the table, and anybody can drive a damn car and deliver some food. There's not much value there, and for that's why you're not getting as paid as much as you would like to. You need to develop skills and traits that are valuable in the marketplace, whatever market that you're in, and especially when it comes to finding and getting with women. I say all that to say this: we live in very weak times at the moment, unfortunately, and because of this is why we have so many simps and beta males that live amongst us. You can call it due to lack of parenting, lack of a father figure. You can say everything in between, even the fact that we got hormones and different chemicals pumped into the water supply that make people more docile and increase the estrogen in men. But I'm not even going to get into all that. Because of the internet and the advancements in technology and everything in between, we have this idea that the world is moving in a progressive state, but at the same time it's getting more weak because the men are getting more weak. Ideals that we stood upon even 10, 20 years ago are no longer in place. You got dudes crying on the internet because they can't get a girlfriend. What kind of world do we live in? I understand that it's hard. I understand that it's unfair, but that's the reality of life. If you were a masculine man, you would understand those obstacles and try to maneuver around them. Build yourself up to be a better man, mentally, physically, financially, whatever it takes in order to achieve your desires.
So this is my humble wrestling collection that I have.
Socialization is one of the biggest predicators to know whether somebody will be productive and effective in society compared to somebody who isn't. When you spend your entire life at home or away from other people because you're scared of what might come of it, that is when you have these biases, limitations set upon you based on whatever type of media that you're consuming.
Miguel, very nice to meet you. I have to do this because my mom said it was essential. I have to have gum so my breath smells like kind of nice.
Okay.
So
Another thing that you have to understand is the fact that it's a pendulum swing. Some men see masculinity or even examples of hyper masculinity that are super exaggerated and not real, and they say to themselves, I can never stack up or match up to that. So they swing directly to the opposite end of the spectrum. So now, instead of even remotely trying to become masculine through his trials and tribulations, he's gonna directly swing the other way and become a femboy, or somebody who's more passive and docile, similar to femininity. And that's not a dig or some type of disrespect towards femininity itself, but in comparison to masculinity, they're two very different things. Socialization is one of the key factors whether or not you can make or break a society. This is why propaganda in certain things is so powerful. When you consume these messages and take them as fact instead of opinion, that's when you enact on them in the real world, and all hell can break loose. There are many different causes to the fall of masculinity, especially in the world that we live in today. But the biggest and most important one that you need to understand is the fact that the world is getting easier. Due to social media and technology itself, there is no longer a need for in-person socialization, getting to know one each other, having your own experiences. Instead, you are preached down to by people just like me on social media who tell you how to think and how to live. Your whole entire life is behind a computer screen. All of your friends are online. They're no longer at the playground in real life. And if that's not the reality, then the reality is this: you have no critical thinking skills nor any type of self-awareness to know that certain bad situations happen on a daily basis, and there's no real way to control that. Only thing that you can control is your response to those situations. Instead of putting in hard work and fighting for whatever it is that you want, you're more willing to become passive and docile in hopes that you're widely accepted by your peers and people that you don't even know. Don't pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one.